Hi, I'm Tony. I'm an author, presenter at Sky Sports, and years ago I went to the jungle and got ill. Very ill. So this is my podcast adventure to find more energy. It's packed with biohacking, science, health tech, supplements, and some of the most well-known experts on the planet.
This is something I spent 4 months of my life doing with electrodes glued to my head so that you can do a lifetime worth of meditation.
Decide what you don't give a fuck about, which is something you don't care about.
Some of it gets quite out there.
I had some stem cells sent up to my house that I had stored, and then I injected myself with mannitol.
And we even hack hangovers.
Alcohol is poisonous. So is water and oxygen in the wrong dosage.
So that's my podcast, Zestology. Live life with energy, vitality, and motivation. Hello, welcome back. Hope you've had a great 2021 so far. Happy New Year again. I'm Tony Rice. I'm walking down by the Thames in West London and recording this podcast on a chilly afternoon. Possibly not the best time to come down and record this podcast because it's kind of fairly narrow stretch of kind of towpath down by the river, and it's not a particularly nice day, but I don't think people have much to do at the moment. Therefore you might be able to hear that there's lots of people jogging past me, running past me. There's a lot of people. Always makes me feel slightly self-conscious walking down here with my big hairy recording equipment, but that stops you hearing all the wind. So maybe not the best time to come down here and record, but anyway, it is beautiful down here today. Oliver's Island Bird Sanctuary in the middle of the Thames over there, and an exciting podcast to tell you about today, because I think, as I said at the start of 2021, first rule of 2021, never talk about 2020. And it certainly was such a weird last couple of months of last year. As a train goes overhead, it's all going on down here on the Thames. Just a really depressing end of year here in London, and yet on a personal level so much joy as well. I don't think I've mentioned on the podcast, although I have on my newsletter, that in the last month of 2020 I got married. We snuck off to Cornwall. We managed to beat lockdown by a few days. One lockdown went into another, but there was just a kind of little gap in the middle where we managed to sneak off and get married in Cornwall. So kind of huge personal happiness and just a really special day, and yet humanity going through so much at the moment, and especially in this country, a lot of people lonely over Christmas as well. So determined to make 2021 a better year, and we can't control very much at the moment, can we? We can't control world events, we can't control lockdowns, we can't control the way that the virus spreads. I suppose we can wash our hands, can't we? And what we can choose is how to react, and that's what I'm choosing for 2021. So that's my personal news. And today's guest, well, if you watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix, you will have watched Tim Kendall. He was one of the stars of the popular and slightly chilling documentary about phone addiction, and his company can help us kick the habit. He is the CEO of Moment. It's an app that helps adults and children use their phones in healthier ways. And so I think the question is, in 2021, are you ready to use your phone less? It's so busy down here. Totally the wrong idea to come down here. He's the former director and president of Pinterest, and he was also director of monetization at Facebook. So his Silicon Valley CV is absolutely impeccable. He knows all about what's going on with phones, addiction, how much we use them, and how detrimental to a kind of positive life it can be. He's such a good speaker. It turns out a lot of the parts of the film, even the bits where he wasn't necessarily speaking in The Social Dilemma, were influenced by him, as you'll hear. So here is Tim Kendall on Zestology. I, like many people, found out about you from a Netflix documentary. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's got in touch with you since then.
But a few people have reached out.
Yeah. I mean, it was a very illuminating documentary, and I think it kind of characterized a lot of what has been going on in many people's heads for a long time around technology. And this is a subject that comes up again and again on my podcast, just because I know. I mean, I'm a TV presenter. That's my job. I rely on technology and I use technology to kind of deliver what we do. And yet I know I haven't got great boundaries around it, which is why I need it so much. So, perhaps we could start by talking about your experience and what you do with your company.
Yeah. Well, my personal experience, which the film depicts, is, I obviously worked behind the curtain on some of these technologies that power the services that a lot of us use. So Facebook and Pinterest. And, a couple years ago, I started to notice that, I was having a lot of trouble figuring out how to get off my device. And I started behaving in ways that weren't really consistent with, the kind of dad, the kind of husband, the kind of friend I wanted to be. I was just really, I talked about this in the film. I was coming home from work and with every intention when I walked through the door that I was going to be engaged and on my knees with my girls, like, super engaged and playful, and half an hour later I'd find myself in a bedroom or in the pantry or in a closet looking at my phone. And sometimes it was work, but sometimes it was Instagram or Pinterest, and I had this awareness of thinking, I don't want to be doing this. I want to be a better dad. I want to be an engaged, present dad, but I can't get off this thing. And, I later learned that that's like the classic definition of addiction.
Yeah.
It's when we literally are unable to make a choice in the near term that aligns with what we aspire to in the medium and long term. That's addiction.
It is. Yeah.
And, I think that our culture, in America, but I'm sure this is true in Western Europe and beyond, really thinks about addiction as confined to the classic things, right? Like alcohol, drugs, opiates. But look, addiction is alive and well and pervades all of our lives on many dimensions. And I think, it pervades food, it pervades sugar. For some people it's gaming, for some people it's gambling, for some people it's driving fast. Like there are just things that almost all people do with an addictive valence to it. And for me, that's absolutely my use of technology. And so, and I think I was looking around and watching it start to really pervade a lot of people's lives, right? Like the classic experience that we've all had at a restaurant where we look over at the table and there's a family of four and they're not looking at each other and they're not talking, they're looking down at a piece of glass.
Yeah. 4
pieces of glass, 4 people, no interaction. They might as well be sitting at separate tables. And so I was still the president of Pinterest at the time when I started really noticing this stuff and just started becoming a lot more passionate about the idea of helping people with this, and did some experimenting on my own, like what will work for me. And one of the experiments I did, which made it into the film, was the kitchen safe. So I don't know if you remember in the film.
I do remember. Yeah.
The plastic safe that the mom suggests, hey, let's put all of our phones in this kitchen safe. And there's a little timer at the top and you can say, hey, let's set this timer for an hour, and then the safe locks and there's no back door. There's no back door unless you get a sledgehammer and smash it, which is what the little girl in the film does.
And you guys did that as well in your family, did you?
Yeah, that's how the film got they came to my house, they interviewed me, and I told them about the kitchen safe, and they filmed me playing with the kitchen safe, and then Jeff Orlowski, the filmmaker, I think rightly thought, oh, this would be really interesting to weave into the fictional storyline. So he did that. But that was one of a series of things that I was playing with early days when I started looking at this problem 4 years ago or so. And in any case, I decided I was so excited about the opportunity that I was going to leave Pinterest and go start something. In the midst of that exploration, I found a company that already existed called Moment, that was created and built by this guy named Kevin Halesh, this 27-year-old at the time who had a problem with his phone and built this app. And it helps people basically understand how much they use their app and use their phone, and then coaches them to use it less. One-man show, couple of million users, generating, profitable. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, what do you think? What if we work together? What if I buy the company from you? We move the company out to California and we'll scale and build it out further. And so we agreed to that. And so that's what I've been working on ever since is Moment, specifically that app, although we're starting to incubate some other ideas. But the ideas are really all thematically about how do we help you get back control over your phone and how you use your phone.
Great. You could have been CEO of a kitchen safe company, but you went for a Moment instead.
Although I reached out to those guys, and I even thought about it. I thought, well, maybe we should partner or do something, because I do think that I'll just a quick aside on that, on the kitchen safe concept. If you look at dieting and you look at behavior change around eating, the tried and true number one best practice is, if I want to stop eating refined sugar, the best way to do that is to get it out of my house or get it out of my apartment. Because what that does, and they call it, there's a term in psychology called pre-commitment, or behavior change. It's called pre-commitment. I pre-commit to not eating sugar by getting it out of my house so that tonight it's not there. And the really tricky thing about the phone is that there aren't mechanisms that allow me to pre-commit, right? Even Apple's product allows me to override whatever rules I put in place. And so that's sort of equivalent to saying, all right, I'm going to get sugar out of my house, but if I snap my fingers, it'll come back. And that is not a recipe for behavior change. And what I like about the kitchen safe a lot is that it mimics that sugar thing, which is, okay, I'm going to pre-commit to not be on this phone for 4 hours. I put it in the kitchen safe, put the top on, I turn the timer to 4 hours, I pop the little button to engage it, and I can't touch my phone for 4 hours no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful model to behave in accordance with, our aspiration, our goal, our trying to be the best sort of version of ourself that we can be.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned about the kind of, in terms of the things that have worked for me, your app is very helpful. And it is very frustrating that, I've got an Apple phone, and that the Apple controls can be so easily overridden. I've got all the best intentions of only using Instagram for 15 minutes a day. But if I want to use it for 16, it is literally a question of pressing a button. And I suppose Apple aren't that minded to change that. Unfortunately, that's just not going to change that quickly, is it?
Well, I don't know if it's ever going to change. I mean, I don't think that Apple has malicious intent. However,
but turkeys don't vote for Christmas, Tim.
Their incentives are not for you to use your phone as you see fit. They claim that they are. Like Tim Cook will tell you, I don't have a dog in this fight of attention. I just want to sell hardware. And that is bullshit. if you look at the profitability, the profits for Apple, they are disproportionately driven by App Store purchases, which are all about attention.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of those profits are driven by game app purchases and in fact in-app purchases, which means I buy virtual things inside a gaming app. What's proportional to how much I spend in an app? How much time I spend in that app. So Tim Cook tells us this thing about hardware, but then, he's generating, $40-50 billion a year in profit on the basis of addicting people to games.
And I think this is why you were such a compelling presence on this documentary, because you have such a background. I mean, so do many of the other contributors as well. But, former president of Pinterest, and you were very high level at Facebook, director of monetization. And you've got someone who's talking on this documentary and talking to me now, who you worked for these companies in the big roles. You know all about this attention economy and what it's doing and how important it is to these business models. And you're able to articulate it very clearly in a way that other people might not have necessarily thought about. But this is exactly what's going on.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's right. One of the new features that I'm really excited about that we're working on at the moment that I think we may release it this week. It's almost done.
Okay.
We don't even have a name for it, but this is what it's going to do, which is pretty cool. So you talked about that experience of being, what is the app that you basically can't get out of? Is it Instagram? I feel like that's or TikTok.
Tim, I'm far too old for TikTok. Come on. It's probably Instagram. There might be a couple of sports apps in there and a bit of news.
Yeah. So now when you open Moment, we're going to ask you, hey, what is an app that you would like to spend more time in that you feel good about?
Yeah.
And we're going to give you a couple choices. So we'll give you Audible, listen to books, Kindle, read a book, Duolingo, learn a language. And you get to select one of those apps. And then we basically watch your sessions. And if you're in a long session on Instagram, we'll send you a push notification and we'll say, hey, Tony, seems like you've been on something for a long time. Do you want to do something else? And then, and if you click that notification, we'll drop you into the app that you selected.
Great.
So imagine you're on YouTube, or imagine you're on Instagram and you get a little nudge, right? It breaks the pattern. It breaks the tunnel vision, and then pops you into an app that's, really more consistent with, the kind of person you want to be, which is someone who reads books and listens to books, and someone who learns a new language, or someone who meditates.
That's cool. Yeah. That's it, isn't it? It's our ideas of who we want to be can be sometimes quite different from who we are, especially when there is addictive behavior involved. Yeah. And so that's what you're trying to do. And have you? Sorry, Tim.
And I would just say that is technology. Technology is wonderful.
Yeah.
If it's applied well.
Yeah.
And that's what technology can do if you ask it to work on your behalf. It can help you align your attention and align where you spend your time with who you want to be. And that's part of the flaw of the current popular services out there, is that they're not aligned with who you want to be. They're actually misaligned with that, right? Netflix CEO and founder sort of famously said a couple years ago, when someone asked him about what's Netflix's competition, who do they worry about the most? And he said, well, it's not a company. It's our users' sleep and friendships.
Yeah.
So they do better if you sleep less and you have fewer friends. That is not. They're not. They're. And I have to be careful, right? Because they're the ones who are distributing the film. Although I don't really need to be careful because I don't have any allegiance to them. And I think they're part of the problem. I don't think they're as pernicious as a Facebook or a TikTok, but they're in the business of extracting attention. And even though it's a subscription business, they still are part of the attention economy.
Interrupting today's Zestology to talk about immunity for one moment. There's never a bad time to boost your immune system, but let's be honest, at the moment, times are pretty tough, aren't they? Life is a bit meh, and we do need to boost our immune system. I don't need to tell you how important a strong immune system is right now, given the global health crisis that's going on. And probiotics, for me, are a key part of the puzzle. It's probably the first supplement that I ever took. Before I was into all this stuff, I started taking probiotics. And over the course of about 2 weeks, I noticed an enormous difference. And now I take P3OM probiotics, which is today's Zestology podcast partner. They improve your digestion, that's good, and help you absorb more nutrients. But they also help ensure your digestive tract and immune system are working the way that they should be, staying strong and healthy. Some probiotics don't kind of survive the stomach acid, don't survive as they go through the digestive system, but P3OM is fully tested to make sure the probiotic strains not only survive in your body, but don't compete with each other as well. And you don't need to refrigerate P3OM as well. So if you are ready to boost your immune system this January, I feel like this January, this is what we need to be doing. Have healthier digestion, burn the fat as well. Go to bioptimizers.com/Zestology. There's a deal on there for you. bioptimizers.com/Zestology. You can use the promo code Zestology10 wherever you are in the world. If you're in the UK, you can use that code as well. Just go to bioptimizers.co.uk rather than .com. Use the code Zestology10. Couple of things to remember: bioptimizers.com/Zestology and promo code Zestology10. I feel there's never been a more important time to boost your immune system than today. Back to the show. I was going to ask if you have looked at the kind of thing that Freedom are trying to do, and to be honest, I can never quite make it work, but actually blocking these apps in a way that that Apple won't provide themselves. For people who haven't used Freedom, it kind of promises to block these apps a little bit more definitively than the own in-app, in-phone kind of settings. Yes. But I can never quite make it work. So I don't know if you've looked at that or not.
I have. No, I know those guys, and they're doing some great work. And it works. In my experience, Freedom works very well on desktop. I haven't used it on Android, but I have heard that it works quite well on Android because Android, the operating system that Google has created, just allows for a lot more degrees of freedom for the developer. So Freedom is developer. They built this app on Android, and it works pretty well in terms of blocking apps. I haven't. What I have, and I could be wrong on this. What I have noticed in using Freedom on my iPhone is that it does block. I believe it blocks. It can block specific websites on my mobile browser, but I don't know that it blocks apps. There is a way to do it. There's a technical way to do it, and we have looked into that at the moment. There's still a bit of a backdoor though for users. So the proper tried and true pre-commitment thing that a kitchen safe does for you is pretty hard to replicate on the iPhone. And I think that's what's so disappointing about Apple's screen time not enabling that as an option.
Yeah.
There is a hack which I have employed personally, which I will share with you and your audience, which is,
please.
Well, the way to do it is to you can go into screen time and you essentially select the apps that you always want access to, no matter when you're, in a fasting mode or not, right?
Yeah.
So like I've selected the phone, text messaging, my calendar, but then all the other apps are in kind of the disallow group. And then I'll set my phone. I'll set the screen time to start downtime, which is when basically it blocks all the apps except for the ones that you've allowed. So I'll say, hey, I want to do downtime from 5 p.m. tonight until 8 p.m. tonight. Yeah. And then I set that. And then at that point, it prompts you to set your password, which is the back door.
Yeah.
And I give the phone to my partner, and she sets the password.
Brilliant.
And I tell her, she swears up and down she's not going to tell me the password. And that's the way you do the virtual kitchen safe.
That's great.
Yourself. And it's great. I will say that when I do that and that's sort of employed, my screen time goes down, and I feel better.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing about fasting on your phone, from your phone. I mean, I think that there's people sort of are always. I feel like we're all looking for ways to feel better and feel more energy. Certainly, that's part of what your podcast is about. Mm. And guess what? Like, we can eat differently. That helps. We can exercise. That helps. We can meditate. That helps. I mean, I think we can get off our phone for an hour, and that helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you always go through a little withdrawal. First 10 minutes of that could be tough. Sometimes the first hour is tough, and then you got to do it for a few hours. But I find that when I get off my phone for a sustained period of time, I am happier. I'm more present, and I'm more energized.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously, you spoke about your kids. I've got a 2-year-old, and I just wonder. It's quite interesting because a lot of my friends have got older children, and they all talk to me about the problems that they have with screen time, and trying to get them to escape the screens at a certain point, and how they're all kind of pushing the boundaries. And it's such a young area, this whole area of technology and screens, that kind of universally established boundaries haven't really been brought in. And I just wonder if in 5 or 10 years' time, we will look back on now and say, wow, we really weren't protecting ourselves at all. And at least now we're doing this, that, and the other to kind of, do you think?
Question. Yeah, it's going to be like secondhand smoke. We discovered in the last 20 years, like, oh shit, that secondhand smoke really makes people sick.
Yeah.
I think we will absolutely have. I mean, you're starting to see the research now among, the science around the impact of overuse of devices on kids' brains, and they've shown thinning of the prefrontal cortex associated with phone overuse among teenagers and children. By the way, the prefrontal cortex is really the part of the brain that distinguishes us from animals. It allows us to exercise judgment. And then they've seen the erosion or overuse also corresponds with the erosion of gray matter around the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's kind of our animal brain that manages impulses. So there's no question that the effects around resulting from overuse are serious, and they're starting to get causally documented. I think the other thing is that one of the things we think about this a lot at Moment, and one of the things that I tell parents when they ask me, hey, what are your suggestions? It's very interesting. Many parents don't want to hear what I'm about to say, which is that, well, I think probably the most powerful lever you have as a parent is modeling. Mm. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And, it's interesting. I in the research that we've done on phone overuse and phone habits and behavior change and behavior change across a family unit, we've talked to doctors who have been fighting the diabetes epidemic and trying to get whole families to change how they eat. And the interesting thing is that what they've seen is that if you have a child who has diabetes and you want to get them to eat differently, but the rest of the family is sort of not on board with looking at their own diet and changing how much, carbs and refined sugar they eat, you really can't change. The child will not change their behavior sustainably.
Right.
What works is when the whole family decides to go into the spotlight, have a reckoning, and say, you know what, we all could eat better.
Yeah.
And we're all going to eat better for the benefit of this child. And by the way, we're all going to benefit too as individuals. And I think that's very analogous to what's going on with technology. Yeah. But a lot of parents will say to me when I suggest that, oh, you don't understand, I manage my life on my phone. Which, by the way, is I don't dispute that. But it certainly I believe you can manage your life on your phone without spending 6 to 8 hours a day on it. So look, I think for a 2-year-old, you didn't ask me specifically for my advice, but there's no reason why there should really be any screen time at that stage. And I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and we've played. Well, they don't do any interactive apps, right? So really, it's just a question of 4-year-old, 6-year-old, like how much are you going to let them watch shows or not as an entertainment diversion? And I think that's a bit of a personal choice as a parent. I will say that in my wife and my experience, and we've done a lot of trial and error on this, we used to put iPads in front of our kids when we took a long drive and let them watch a show. And what we noticed, and then we did an experiment. We tried a couple drives where we didn't let them watch a show.
Right.
They complained for 10 minutes at the beginning. But what we noticed was that when we got out of the car, when they didn't watch a show, they were just a lot more emotionally regulated and a lot more pleasant to be around.
Wow.
And when they did watch a show, the drive was easier. We didn't have to do as much work as parents. But then when we got to the destination, we got out of the car, it was a lot more work to be a parent.
Yeah. That's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. So my wife and I, for the most part, look, it's not, and I will also say, and I have a tremendous amount of empathy and compassion for this time that we're in with quarantine and the fact that a lot of the device norms and all that, I think, has to flex. But I will say that that's our experience. And so I think I would recommend to parents to play with that. And then they can make a decision about what trade-offs they are willing to make, or even if they notice a trade-off.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the concept of our children just acting as complete sponges for our behavior was brought home fairly recently when my 2-year-old son was picked up my phone and walked around with it clasped to his ear saying, yep, 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 as if he was taking a call. It's great. Yeah.
My 3-year-old, when my now 6-year-old was 3, she was holding a phone up and telling me she was on a work call.
Oh, it's so funny. It's so sweet.
And it is sort of, it's really eye-opening and heartbreaking and helpful. Yeah. Because you see how powerful modeling is. There's an interesting stat that I like around modeling, which is that, if you ask parents if they think, this is an interesting, so if you ask parents if they think that their kids should wear a bike helmet when they ride a bike, 95% say absolutely.
Yeah.
It's critical. And then you ask the same parent, well, do you wear a bike helmet when you ride a bike? 25% wear a helmet. And then, what percentage of kids wear bike helmets consistently? 40%.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Total disconnect on, and you see the impact of modeling. Now let's take something different. Seatbelts. Basically, 99% think you got to do it. 99% do it. 99% of kids do it.
Yeah. There you have it.
Yeah.
Tim, I'd love to chat for another 20 minutes, but talking of childcare, I've got to go and pick up my son from nursery. So I've got an important 2 final questions to ask you. What is one book you'd recommend and one tip for living with more energy and vitality?
Well, the book I would recommend, one of my favorite books of all time is, I say all time, but I've only really known about this book for a few years, but I think I've listened or read it through cover to cover probably 10 times, is Pema Chodron's book, who's a Buddhist nun. She wrote this book called When Things Fall Apart.
Okay.
And it really epitomizes, I think, these themes around being compassionate with yourself, being gentle with yourself, and exploring kindness in the world around you. And it's one of the most heartwarming, kind of life-changing books I've ever read. So that's the book I would recommend.
That sounds great.
And then what was about energy? Something energy?
Yeah, a tip for living with more energy and vitality.
Well, this is becoming a little bit of the Silicon Valley cliche, but I've been trying to do this for going on 6 years, and that is in the morning. I have a cold tub that is about 40 degrees that I get into for anywhere between 3 and 5 minutes every morning when I wake up. Just as good, by the way, is taking a 1 minute cold shower.
Yeah.
There are all these physiological benefits. By the way, it helps your supports immune system, does all this, but also just like, I don't know, it really makes you feel alive and energized and ready for the day. And it's hard, right? And I think there's something really wonderful, hard, and sort of the texture of life about doing something really hard right when you get up.
I knew you looked energized before we started this interview. You just sat down. So it's morning your time. You've done that. I could tell.
I was shivering, right?
Yeah. Tim, look, so good to talk to you. Thank you so much for all the good work you're doing with Moment. I can't wait to see the new feature and hear what it's called as well.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Tony.
That is it for Tim Kendall and for today's Zestology pretty much. Thank you to Tim and thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. As always, got some nice stuff coming up for you in 2021. As I say, I always try and make January a little bit more focused towards having a kind of positive, happy, healthy year, and also a little bit of goal setting and so on. And I want to remind you about my podcast partner for today, because there's never a better time to boost your immune system, but especially at the start of the year, especially in the middle of the winter when our immune systems might be a bit low anyway. And you don't need me to tell you what's going on at the moment means that we want our immune systems to be as good as possible. And today's podcast partner, in fact, for all of January, is P3OM probiotics. How can I describe these probiotics? I mean, hardcore probiotics, basically. They improve your digestion, they help you to absorb nutrients, they help you to ensure your digestive tract and immune system stay healthy and strong. Many of the other products on the market, when it comes to probiotics, you swallow them, and because they're kind of not coated in the right way, they don't actually survive your own stomach acid, but P3OM does. They're fully tested to make sure the probiotic strains survive in your body but don't compete with each other as well. So P3OM, we're all about immunity on this podcast. It is such an important part of energizing, and at the moment, as I said a little bit earlier on, we can't control much at the moment in the world. We can choose how we react, and we can help to boost our immune system, and I think that involves taking things like vitamin C, zinc, working out, So glad that I made the decision a couple of years ago to come and record these podcasts out and about, because it's just a chance to get out on a damp, dull January day. And also taking the right supplements like P3OM probiotics. You can head to bioptimizers.com/zestology and use the code zestology10 if you want to get involved in these probiotics. They're really good. And as I say, all the podcast partners on this podcast I use myself. If you're in the UK, I have good news for you. You can get them as well. You can go to bioptimizers.co.uk and use the code zestology10. It's bioptimizers.co.uk and use the code zestology10 for a bit of P3OM probiotics. If you're ready to boost your immune system, have healthier digestion, and burn the fat as well. That's not a bad one too, is it? So plenty to kind of get stuck into in January. And have a good week. I mean, back to it. What do they call this? They normally call like the first week in January something very depressing. Like one of the most depressing weeks in January. But when you're locked down and you're not able to go out, what does it become then? I think we're just going to choose to focus on what we can control and how we react to it. Thanks for listening to Zestology. I will be back next week. I will see you then. Until then, have a good one.